3. All new, allegedly true, Dogman or Werewolf accounts. Beginning with the young man walking with the Dogman on the mountain. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my extreme sports loving buddy that I'm gonna call Rocky decided to take a day off. He invited me to walk up this mountain with him. He told me it was minimum effort in return for maximum view, and so I was in. I had no idea that by the time sundown came around, I'd be getting my one and only view of a Dogman, or at least a werewolf-style upright walking canine type of a creature. So Rocky took me to the Hawk Rock Overlook in Duncannon, PA, which is right on the Appalachian Trail over there. He was right. We just walk, and then eventually we're way up in the sky with a view that is just unforgettable and better to watch than any recent Hollywood movie offering by far. It's decent exercise too. At any rate, as it got to be later in the afternoon, I noticed two figures off in the distance on a different high spot. It sure looked like one of them was a werewolf, as in a Dogman. I pointed this out to Rocky and he flipped. He took out his phone, which has a better zoom on the camera than mine. But when he zoomed in, he couldn't find them anymore. I also couldn't see where they had gone with my naked eye, but obviously they had split. We both got a shiver from the weird experience, and we each asked each other if we had witnessed a scene from a very ancient past, like possibly a residual haunting. Neither of those figures looked modern to us at first glance, and it was a strange and unsettling experience, but also kind of exciting. Rocky and I kept noticing the two figures. Initially, before the sun had gone too far down, we got a fairly clear view of them. One was a human with a cafe au lait skin tone, dark curly hair, and a clean-shaven face. He was shirtless with some kind of a dark loincloth that seemed to be made from hair or fur or something which had edges that dangled down from it. He was only a little more than half the height of the tall bipedal canine, who was covered in very dark or even black fur. I couldn't tell if the furry one was wearing anything, but if he was, it had to have been very dark, not to stand out against his pitch-black fur coat. He did, however, seem to be holding some kind of a stick. It was not a branch from a tree, but rather some sort of machine-tooled object of some kind. At first I thought it was one of those little tiny wooden replica baseball bats that I've sometimes seen in tourist stores. At another point I thought maybe it was a hammer or a wrench being held from the wrong end. In both cases I was just guessing though. It looked like a man-made object. That's the point I'm trying to get across. Sometimes they were higher up than we were, and sometimes they were down beneath us, but when either of us would take out our camera, we wouldn't be able to spot those two figures anymore. Eventually, when I saw them and reached for my phone, Rocky stopped me from taking it out and suggested that we just watch. We were closer that time than we had been on any previous occasion, and that hairy one looked more like a werewolf or wolfman than it even had from a distance. It seemed like they were having an argument, or really, it looked like the shorter human-looking one was very unhappy with a tall, skinny, hairy, dog-eared and dog-faced big bad wolf character. Rocky gestured for me to be quiet, and then he gestured for me to listen. Once in a while, when the breeze blew just right, or maybe held still just enough, I could make out a word here or there that the smaller one was saying to the Dogman, who never seemed to react in any way. The dog-headed one kept looking out from their perch, studying the land for miles around. I thought the shorter one said something about a house, but he said it again, and I think he was actually referring to hunting. as in the hunting of, followed by some word that I couldn't understand. La casa means house, but La casa with a Z means hunting. I also thought I was hearing him refer to winter or invierno. It was far enough away, though, that I might have been hearing entirely different words than that and misinterpreting them. I really do feel that this was a modern human speaking modern Spanish, although I'm only going on the circumstantial evidence of a few words and my gut feeling. As eerie as this experience was, I don't think we were seeing ghosts or a replay of the past, and I mostly think that because of the way it all ended. Rocky and I stood there, silently, watching the two figures intently for what had to have been several minutes. Suddenly, the wind changed direction drastically, creating a mild sucking sound, and then both figures on that other ledge over there, simultaneously, as in at the exact same moment, turned their heads to look directly at us. Rocky and I bolted, praying out loud as we ran down that mountain. Rocky started driving out of there before I got the car door closed, and he sped out so fast and desperately that I thought we were going to crash or get arrested for reckless driving. Instead of taking us home, Rocky drove into Duncannon and screeched to a stop near the St. Bernadette Catholic Church. I sat there and I watched him run inside. I presume he prayed or asked for forgiveness or whatever you're supposed to do in such a circumstance. Me, I wandered around town. I found a store to buy a soda in, started talking to a girl in that store, then asked her out on a date. In the middle of the date that night, I started to tell her about what had happened to me and Rocky on the mountain. She suddenly got very serious and looked me in the eyes. Was the wolf-headed one really tall? Like 10 or 11 feet tall, she asked. I thought about it, and that sounded ridiculous. I was about to say no. But then I remembered that the Dogman was almost twice as tall as the other man. If the shorter one was 5.5 feet tall, then that would have made the skinny Dogman 10 or 11 feet tall. I had to tell her yes. And that tall dog-headed man, she asked. He looked at you? Yeah, I responded. Both of them did. Well, that was the end of the date. She wouldn't even let me know where she lived. Told me to stay away from her permanently. I asked why as she ran away, and she refused to answer. She wouldn't even look at me anymore. Could anyone explain what that was all about? All I know is that I had a horrible day the time that Rocky and I saw the young man walking with the Dogman on the mountain. My brother is now a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a lot on my shoulders these days, but I felt ready for the challenge. When it turned out that my younger brother had willingly decided to become a werewolf, as in an actual real fur and fangs and claws kind of werewolf, I began to have doubts that I'm anywhere near ready to handle anything like this. I have a brother we can call Charlie, who's 11 years younger than I am. I've recently had to start to learn how to take care of Charlie, you see. We have the same father and different mothers, but he is my brother, not half or any other percentage. When our dad unexpectedly left us a year after his mom did, I wound up being the closest thing to a responsible adult to take care of Charlie, who was left. I'm 27 now, and I've never been known to be a very organized person, so you can tell that poor Charlie didn't really have too many options. My own mother is a person I'm not even gonna get into, but trust me, she would not have been interested in having one of her 3 ex-husbands' sons stay with her. Charlie is around a year and a half away from being 18 and legally allowed to take care of himself, And I was just hoping to hold out and look out for the guy for that little while longer until he'd be free in a legal sense. Well, recently I've started talking to a lawyer about getting the kid an emancipated minor status. It's not that I've failed to take care of him. Well, I mean, it's not entirely that I've been a big failure in terms of raising my younger brother. It's also that recently, without warning me beforehand, he went ahead and joined a gang of werewolves. You may tell me werewolves aren't real. I know. That's exactly what I said to Charlie when he told me over Cheerios one morning that he was now a werewolf. Even while I was telling him that I didn't believe in werewolves, I was already worrying that he meant the word in some other, and maybe even darker way. I said something to that effect, and Charlie reassured me. Oh, don't worry, bro. We're not some kind of devil worshiper cult or anything like that. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Then he went on. We just transform into wolfmen and jackal-headed creatures, and then we go on wild pagan hunts, taking what we want and eating it before it's even had a chance to pass on into the next world. I felt nauseous. This was way worse than I thought. He wasn't summoning monsters. He had become the monster. And he was cavorting in blood revels like an animal, or really like something beneath an animal. I didn't know if he was literally transforming into a monster, but I had a feeling that there was a lot of truth in the horror scene that he had just so casually described to me. There was no hostility in Charlie when he told me about joining the werewolves. I think he actually thought I'd be happy for him. But when he discovered how horrified I was, all communication between us soured. He stays out all night almost every night and comes home with disgusting stains on his clothing. I can't do anything to control him, but if he gets caught doing any of these sickening things that I know he's been doing, then I'm going to be held just as responsible as he is. My friend laughed at me when he saw how stressed I was about all of this. He told me there's no such thing as werewolves. He said all we had to do was follow the kid to his next meetup with the so-called evil werewolves. We'd try to get an idea of what they were actually doing, as opposed to what my brother said they were doing, and then we'd decide what to do from there, if anything at all. So we followed Charlie, who knew exactly what we had planned to do, and led us into a clearing in the woods nearby. Within seconds, we were surrounded by honest-to-God werewolves, tall men with wolf heads, dog heads, jackal, and hyena heads. They all wore hooded robes, and the entire scene felt like a nightmare. They stripped us of our clothing and every earthly belonging we had on us. Then they forced us to sign papers using our own blood. I have no idea what the papers said. I don't remember what happened next, but I woke up leaning against a wall outside of the bus station, standing up. People were staring at me, and I wondered if my clothes were dirty. Looking down, I saw that I was not, in fact, wearing any clothes at all, dirty or not. Then I remembered what happened. My brother and the werewolves. I begged people in the crowd, asking them to lend me some clothing to get home in, but people backed away from me as though I were the Frankenstein monster. Instead of helping me, someone called the cops, and I spent the night in lockup, wearing clothing the cops gave me, that I discovered later, had fleas in it. I got off lucky though. I'm not even going to tell you what my brother's friends did to my buddy. So yeah, I'm talking to a lawyer about getting my brother emancipated minor status. Charlie doesn't even know yet. I'm hoping he's cool with it, because if he says no, then I'm screwed. He's just gonna keep doing things to get me in trouble until child welfare takes him away from me anyway. I don't know if he's coming home tonight or not, but if he does, I'm gonna really give him the hard sell on becoming an emancipated minor. You see, my life is in a shambles. And it's all because my brother is now a werewolf. Here's a story submitted by one of our channel members, but they've asked me not to tell you who they are. I think we're gonna call this one Stalked by a Shapeshifter. Dear Scary Stories NYC. So my little sister Angie, not her real name, at age 18 took off up to the Salamanca Indian Reservation in southwest New York State to stay with some family. This is the Seneca Nation. They are part of the Iroquois Confederacy. The first day there, Angie saw a really tall and apparently great-looking guy who, as it turned out, was some bigwig for a tribe who lived on a sister reservation further north. He would frequent this area for business or something. He tried to talk to Angie, but she blew him off, even though she did find him attractive. Angie's cute even now that she's older, but when she was 18, she was really cute. I think she just didn't know it. He wouldn't stop staring at her though, and every time he would see her around town, he would just give her that stalker-like stare. Now, I'm going to tell you what I've been told by one of my Native American relatives. That shape-shifting witches are considered quite real, and medicine men or women are like one step away from being that. Shamans in general are a kind of light worker, just don't piss them off. Also, even some of the higher-ups in the tribe can be one or the other of these. That being said, I'll move on. So it didn't take Angie long to get a job and her own place. I won't say where she worked, but I will say that she and a co-worker who was also a very young woman we'll call Susie got off late one night, and my sister's place wasn't too far from there, but the other girl's home was a good little walk away. Angie said she asked Susie if she wanted to bunk on her couch, but Susie needed to get home for some reason I don't remember. Neither one had a car. Angie, like myself, is the protective type. Even though we're a female, we grew up in the woods and are comfortable with firearms. So, Angie insisted on walking Susie home. Now at that time, Angie had decided that she was going to become a Buddhist, and she wanted nothing to do with firearms or harming anything at all. Back then, she changed spiritual practices every few months. I should note, she had been all Wiccan and played with some occult stuff just before her move there. I'm not saying that necessarily had anything to do with it. Also, our family had told her to never walk alone in the woods, even with a firearm, much less without one like she was doing. So the two girls took a shortcut along a railroad track to Susie's house, and everything seemed fine. Susie asked my sister if she wanted to bunk on the couch, but Angie, who was feeling very confident about herself and her oneness with nature, declined. Apparently as she headed back, the moon was big, maybe not full, but very bright, and she was really enjoying the atmosphere of trees lining the tracks, and the sound of the crunching rocks as she walked. It was the beginning of fall, so it was cool, but not cold. Yes, she did tell me all this. We're both into ambience, okay? So about the crunching rocks, she said she was about halfway back home when she heard the crunching behind her. She was too scared to turn around, as she thought it was a person. This was because she clearly heard 2 feet that would walk when she walked and stop when she stopped. And it was when she stopped the second time that she heard a deep growl like she had never heard before. Well, that did it. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. She was very athletic at that age, so I'm sure she was moving pretty good. Angie told me she distinctly heard it drop to all fours when they started running. Also, she had seen its shadow from the corner of her eye, and she said it was huge. Angie just collapsed when she got to the edge of town by the streetlights. She said at that point, she didn't even care if it got her. She had accepted that this very well could be the end. Plus, she could hardly breathe. However, it seemed to have disappeared. Maybe it just walked off, as she told me that she really couldn't hear anything over her own breathing and heartbeat. As a side note, I should mention that a young woman was found murdered in the woods not far from there, but it turned out that crime had happened long before Angie moved to the area. I would also like to say that I don't know that Mr. Stalker Gaze had anything to do with it, but I think my sister felt that possibly he had. She was concerned enough that she moved away from there, not long after this all took place. I'm sorry I don't have all the details. I'm going off of memory, and it was over 20 years ago. Plus, I haven't kept in touch with a lot of that side of the family, not to mention my sister, who I haven't spoken to in some years. However, yes, my sister herself thought it was a shape-shifting werewolf. She felt it wasn't just an animal, and that it was having some fun with her. I think she thought it had something to do with that guy. Well, that's the story, as well as I can remember it. If you use this, or even part of it, please keep it anonymous. I thought you might find it interesting, at the very least. He's a serious guy, not a leg puller. Talking about our EP, Stanley Fuller. Please join us in thanking our executive producer, Stanley Fuller, for making this episode possible. Stanley gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman stories as well as our over 25 hours of archived secret stories. Here comes our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman, to explain the deets. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.